Before I start this video, I want to ask you to support me by subscribing to my channel. And please like this video if you find it helpful. And of course, if you have some questions or suggestions, welcome to the comments. And we jump right in.
Hi everyone! The topic of today's video is about how to improve your code through testing. Therefore, we begin to study PHPUnit. So, PHPUnit is a framework-independent library for unit tests in PHP. The basic idea is to test small blocks of code against expected results. With unit testing, we do not test the entire application as a whole, but each component of the code separately. All components can be tested at least once. This allows errors to be detected at an early stage. With a small testing area, it's easier to track down the cause of bugs when they occur. So, let's install Symfony Test Pack, which installs packages needed for testing. After installing the dependencies needed for testing, we see the following instructions. The first one tells us that we have to write test cases in the tests folder. Here it appeared after installing the library. The second instruction tells us that we can use maker bundle to create new tests. And the third instruction shows us the command to run tests. Let's try it. Since we have not created tests yet, after executing the command in the terminal, we'll see the message "No tests executed." And we move on. But before we start creating our first test, we need to change the ownership of the tests folder. Now let's create a simple service whose task will simply return the message "Hello World", and then we will test it. Now we can create a test to see if the service actually returns "Hello World" message or not. Actually, Symfony documentation divides tests into three types. First, unit tests, second, integration tests, and third, application tests. Let's start with unit tests. They are used to test a single class or a specific method in a certain class. The main task of unit tests is to check whether the behavior of a class or some method of a class matches what is expected. By convention, the folder structure in the tests folder should be the same as in the src folder. Therefore, if we want to test a certain class located in the service folder, Then we need to create a folder with the same name in the tests folder. Also, if there are a lot of tests, you can create subdirectories for each type of tests. For example, unit for unit tests or functional for functional tests. In a Symfony application, writing unit tests is exactly the same as writing standard PHP unit tests. And here is the basic conventions and steps for writing tests with PHPUnit. First, in the service folder, which placed in the tests folder, we need to create a new PHP class with the name my hello service test. As you can see, a suffix test is added to the name of the service that we will test. Secondly, in most cases for unit tests, such classes should inherit test case. Tests are public methods with names beginning with the test prefix. So let's create the first test. So, here we create an instance of the class myHelloService. And the fourth step in creating our unit test is to use assertion methods to assert that the actual value matches the expected value. Please note that PHPUnit only executes public methods that are prefixed with the word test. Even so, as an alternative to prefixing your test method names with test, you can use the test annotation in a methods doc block to mark it as a test method. But that's not very common. Let's put everything back the way it was. And there is one more thing I would like to say before running the test. The name of the test method should be meaningful and more like a sentence describing what exactly we are testing. The short name, as in usual PHP class, is not appropriate here. You'll understand this after running the test when you see the test results in the console. So, let's run the tests. You can do this in several ways. I'm using PHP Storm, and the easiest thing is to run the test from the IDE interface. Just click on this arrow to run all tests of this class, or this arrow to run this particular test. You can also run tests with debug and coverage. The second way you can run tests is to use the terminal. If you want to run all tests of your application, use this command. If you want to run all tests in the service folder, you need to use this command. And if you want to run tests for a certain class, use the command. Now let's set some other expected value here to see what the test results will look like. Here you can see that we run my hello service test hello world message, and expected value is 1 to 3 and actual value is hello world. We see that the problem in the 14th line, and we see that test was failed. So as you can see, this descriptive name of the method will help you quickly figure out which test failed and where to look for errors in the code. When we run unit tests from the IDE interface or using a terminal command, how exactly does the PHPUnit determine that this class is a test and needs to be run? So, first, PHPUnit look for the configuration file, which is phpunit.xml.dist. Here it in the root folder of your project. Let's open it. And here you can find the test suite XML tag, and here you can see the directory tag. Because of this value, PHPUnit knows that it should look for tests in the test directory. Then PHPUnit finds that directory and recursively looks for every class that ends with the word test. Finally, PHPUnit gets a list of all public methods of the test classes, and then PHPUnit will execute only that public methods that are prefixed with the word test, or that public methods that in their doc block have test annotation. And that's all the PHPUnit needs to find the tests and execute them. And we are moving on. And the next kind of tests are integration tests. Integration testing is defined as a type of testing where software modules are integrated logically and tested as a group. So, integration tests differ from unit tests in that they test a larger part of the application. If in the case of unit tests the test class inherited test case, then in the case of integration tests it should inherit kernel test case. The boot kernel method of the kernel test case class helps you to create and boot the kernel in your tests to fetch a service from the dependency injection container. To show how this works, I'll create another service that will inject our first service through the constructor. Thus, a dependency will be added to the logic of the new service. And then I'll create an integration test for this new service. there is one important thing you should know about kernel test case. It makes sure that kernel is rebooted for each test. So because of that, each test is run independently from each other. Kernel test case needs to find the application kernel to initialize in order to run the tests. And the kernel class is usually defined in the .env.test file in the kernel class variable. So let's back to our integration tests. And see what happens in this code. Here we boot the Symfony kernel. Here we use the getContainer method to access the service container. Here we get my complex service. And here we run this service. And finally here we test the result. And for today it's all. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoy this video and see you next time.